Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Today, we have a new set of stories about crazy people for you to enjoy. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. We'll start with a little warm-up story. A doctor's petty dig at lawyers. A friend of mine is a doctor. For one reason or another, he's often called upon to give statements and depositions to lawyers. He hates doing this because, in his words, lawyers love wasting time and have this air of pompous superiority. At some point, every single lawyer asks him, as if trying to undermine his credibility, "Did you pass your medical boards on the first try?" His response is to smile and say, "Yes, I did. Did you pass your bar exam on the first try?" The most common response is an annoyed look followed by an, "I'm asking the questions here." Apparently, a lot of lawyers didn't pass on the first try and hate when you bring it up. Knocks them down a few pegs. And our next story. Manager made me work while I was on painkillers. Around 2 years ago, I used to work for this grocery store right around the corner from where I lived. I loved working there. I constantly had something to do, and when the store wasn't busy, I'd talk with my coworkers and just enjoy the night. My main position was in the bakery/hot food area, but since we were only a small one, only one worker would be in at a time. A regular night would involve me slicing meat, serving food, and putting the baked goods into the oven. After about 6 months of working there, I found out that I was moving. I felt terrible and gave my manager my 2 weeks' notice. I felt terrible because this was out of the blue and they had to train someone new, so I offered to work without pay for the 2 weeks so they wouldn't lose money. My manager said no, it was fine, but he greatly appreciated it. Out of nowhere, I developed a severe pain in my mouth and discovered that my wisdom teeth were coming in and were causing some weird damage to my jaw. This resulted in me needing emergency surgery on the weekend after my 2-week notice was up. The day after my surgery, my manager texts me. A-hole manager, AM. "OP, we need you today. The scheduled worker called in sick and no one wants to cover his shift." Me. "Actually, AM, I just had surgery last night for my wisdom teeth and have taken a bunch of painkillers to soothe the pain. Also, my 2 weeks notice is up, so I technically don't work for you anymore." AM. "Do I sound like I give a F? We need you, and if you don't come now, I'll see to it that you don't get hired anywhere else. So how does working sound now?" I was shocked. Before today, my manager had been the best boss to work for, so I was utterly surprised. Me. "All right, I'll be in soon, I guess." AM. "You better be, or else." About 5 minutes later, I get dropped off at work. Normally I'd walk there, but I'd taken so many painkillers that I could barely remember how to get there. AM. "What took you so long? I've had to cover for you in the bakery for the past half hour." His last text was only sent 5 minutes before that. I quickly apologized, walked into the bakery, and started doing my work. Normally, I'm a good person who wouldn't start trouble, but because of how high I was ready to start making AM's life a living hell. Every time he asked for someone to help him out with a task, I would volunteer to help. Each time I would make myself fall off the ladder or cause food to come crashing down on me. He kept telling me it was all right, but as the night went on, I could tell his blood was starting to boil, so I continued. As the end of the night neared, my job was to clean the meat slicer, and I had a plan. I began to clean the meat slicer, but I accidentally turned it on. By this time, I had no problems controlling my body, so I came as close as I could to cutting myself without actually doing it. AM walked in to see me doing this and immediately screamed at me and told me how I could have killed myself. I just responded with a confused look on my face and said, "Oh, whoops." He then sat there looking at me and pulled me into his office where he began screaming at me for all the stupid things I'd done that night. The falling off the ladder, the dropping food on me, and now the meat slicer? Instead of getting upset because it was technically his fault, I just sat there with a blank look on my face, pulled out my phone, and showed him the messages he sent me. He went silent. I stood up and told him, "You'll be hearing from my lawyer," and walked out. The grocery store ended up firing AM for mistreating the employees, and he also got sued for psychological harassment by one of the other employees. The store also gave me a hefty paycheck because they decided to settle out of court instead of fighting a lawsuit that they would inevitably lose. And our next story. You're only a builder. What the hell do you know? Just build the damn thing to spec. I grew up in a small community on an island off the coast of a thriving metropolitan area. It had its ups and downs, but was generally a pretty quiet sort of life. The community had a fairly large immigrant population from various European countries, and one of those was, well, let's call him John. John the Builder. He and his numerous brothers had all moved to the island together and started a construction company. John was a big, affable man, easygoing and always smiling. He spoke excellent English, but with a thick accent. Sometimes people assumed his accent meant his grasp of business was lacking, but usually not for long. Within a decade or so of moving there, John and his brothers were pretty much the only builders of note on the island, and anything bigger than a garden shed would go through them. Around that time, my granddad retired and moved to the island with my grandma. He contracted John to help him build his retirement house, and they bonded over the mutual appreciation of a really good concrete mix and pour. By then, John's family were good friends of ours too, so John and my granddad kept in touch regularly and would often get into involved discussions of building methods and the like. Some years later, the old couple running the main petrol station in town decided to sell out and retire. The place was bought by Big Fuel Company. Big Fuel Company decided that the quaint old station and garage was in dire need of a complete makeover and modernization and drew up plans accordingly. After putting the work out for tender, they grudgingly accepted that with the cost of relocating a labor force from the mainland to the island for the work, John's construction firm was by far the most cost-effective. They weren't too happy about it, though, and made it clear that they thought John and his brothers were a bunch of rural cowboys who couldn't be trusted to nail two planks together. Still, the contracts were signed, and the blueprints delivered to John. As well as the usual amenities, the new station was to have a high, artistically stylish roof over the fuel pumps held up by two support pillars. You know the sort of thing. John reads the plans, thought about the stiff sea breezes the location was subject to, and frowned. He took the blueprints around to my granddad and discussed them. Possibly not entirely within the bounds of the contract, but John was concerned. The next day, John rang Big Fuel Company's contact and said in his thick accent, "This roof isn't going to stand up. The support pillar footings are too shallow, and the roof itself is too large for pillars of that size. Plus, you haven't factored in the strength of the winds we get here. Everything else is fine, but you need to redesign that roof." "Rubbish," scoffed the Big Fuel Company guy. "We had it designed by a very exclusive architect, and our engineers signed off on it. It's fine. You don't know what you're talking about." "Maybe," said John, "but I've been building here for 20 years, and I think you should go over the design again." "Don't be ridiculous. You're just trying to get the contract extended. We don't need to check the design. Now get to building." Click. John, being a genuinely nice bloke, thought that maybe this was just one person being difficult, and also felt that this sort of thing should probably be in writing. He sat down and wrote a clear letter expressing his concerns about the fuel pump shelter and sent it overnight to the Big Fuel Company office on the mainland. The next day, he got a call from the Big Fuel Company office from someone further up the ranks. "Who the hell is this? Who do you think you are, trying to tell our architects and engineers they don't know what they're doing? You're only a builder. What the hell do you know? Just build the damn thing." "Could you put that in writing, please?" asked John. This is the point at which a sensible manager would be given pause. When the contractor specifically asks for it in writing, you should probably ask why. "Fine," snarls the Big Fuel Company guy, and faxes through a terse note that he'd read the letter and considered it mistaken, and to get on with the construction. John shrugged, carefully filed the note, and went ahead with the build. A little over a month later, the new station was finished, roof and all. On a pleasant, gusty day, perfect for sailing, the Big Fuel Company bigwigs flew over to see the result. Standing there with John and a curious crowd of locals, they watched as the shiny new stylish roof danced and swayed in the wind in a manner decidedly unlikely to reassure anyone thinking of refueling their car underneath this. "What the F is this?" inquired the Big Fuel Company boss. "Just what I tried to warn you about," replied John. "Bullcrap! You effed up the construction and now you're trying to pin it on us. We're not paying for this. You're going to need to tear it down at your expense and build it right." "It's built exactly to your blueprints," said John. "If you want it rebuilt, you have to pay for it, preferably with a new design." "Not a chance. This is on you. And if you try and dodge responsibility for it, we'll sue." "Sounds good," said John. "See you in court." So the fuel station was cordoned off and legal proceedings went ahead. I don't know much about them, but at some point I do know something like this happened. Judge: Defense, you may call your first expert witness. John's lawyer: Thank you, Your Honor. We'll call Professor Thornay's granddad, internationally recognized civil engineer who chaired the report into the redacted bridge collapse and was head of engineering at redacted university for 25 years. Big Fuel Company's legal team. John's lawyer: Thank you for joining us, Professor. Would you please tell the court how you first learned of the project in question? My granddad: Of course. John first approached me with his concerns directly after receiving the blueprints. I agreed with his assessment and have since drawn up a brief report on the problems of the roof design. The details and supporting calculations are in pages 4 through 16, but if you don't mind, I'll just read from the summary. I noted the following problems. Big Fuel Company's legal team: Oh, crap. What with that and the note John had, it didn't take long to be settled. Big Fuel Company was on the hook for all of it, plus legal fees. They had to pay John to tear down the unstable roof and build a new one, designed by a different architect and checked by off-site engineers. Nonetheless, when John got the new plans, he rang Big Fuel Company and said, "Hope you don't mind. I'm going to run these past the prof before we get started." Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one.